Throughout the history of the United States, immigrants have been coming from all over the world to create new lives in America. People from all around the world have contributed to American culture by bringing traditions from the different countries from where they came from to the United States. These traditions have ranged from different religious practices to cultural food recipes to doing different types of drugs. During the mid to late 1800s, immigration to the United States became more and more prevalent, with immigrants from Europe and Asia coming to make new lives for themselves and their families. When Chinese immigrants came to the United States, some immigrants brought the tradition of opium smoking to America. This would prove problematic, as Americans were growing fearful of immigrants, and the knowledge that they were bringing an addictive substance to America was used against many immigrant cultures. The opium, however, would change the United States for the rest of its history. Through Chinese encounters with British imperialism, cultural exchange between Chinese immigrants and Victorian Americans, and the scientific exploration of morphine and heroin, the opium brought to the United States came to revolutionize both medical science and drug addiction. During the early 18th century, conflicts arose between the British Empire and the Qing dynasty of China. These conflicts were brought about by the high demand for Chinese goods in Britain and the near non-existent demand for British goods in China. China produced porcelain, rhubarb, and tea, all of which were items the British were addicted to. Likewise, the Qing dynasty of China only imported one commodity at a rate that was profitable for other nations: silver. The only nations that could produce large enough quantities of silver to sell were Japan and Spain. The British saw their debt increase exponentially until the discovery of opium. The tobacco grown in the Americas was highly addictive and produced large amounts of money. However, the addiction to tobacco in China did not rival British addictions to Chinese goods. When opium, an even more addictive substance than tobacco, was found, it seemed to be the solution to the British debt crisis. As British merchants began to sell opium to Chinese merchants, their debt began giving way to credit. Although it was not enough to bring the British profit, tobacco was a very common commodity in China that was imported from Britain. Many Chinese citizens smoked tobacco in long pipes, and smoking was seen as a sign of wealth. When opium entered Chinese markets, smokers would add small amounts of opium to their tobacco. As they plunged deeper into their addiction to opium, they increased the ratio of opium to tobacco until many smoked pure dried opium. The British, reacting to this threat to both their wealth and their supply of Chinese goods, attacked and took the city of Hong Kong. This sparked a war known as the First Opium War, and the Second War followed that. At the end of the Second Opium War, Qing dynasty China was divided up by the major European powers into spheres of influence. While the emperor still was the sovereign head of the Qing dynasty China, his power was nearly completely taken away. The people of China also suffered as European exploitation policies, natural disasters, and peasant rebellions shook China to its core. Many of the poorer citizens of China saw one ray of hope in their dismal surroundings, the United States. As Chinese citizens came to the United States, railroad companies and mines found these immigrants to be a cheap source of labor. Projects like the Transcontinental Railroad needed vast amounts of people willing to work for low wages. They found these traits in immigrants from China and Mexico. Mines also saw potential in Chinese labor forces due to the low wages and the popular observation made by the railroad companies that the Chinese workers displayed greater teamwork than most Americans of European descent. Due to this, many Americans were losing their jobs. As big employers began to replace their European-American workforce with Chinese immigrants, tension between immigrants and European-Americans skyrocketed. Though they were losing jobs, white Americans held more political and social influence than immigrants. While attacks against Chinese immigrants grew more and more frequent, most courts and police departments did little or nothing to prevent them or prosecute the attackers. Chinese immigrants began to grow more and more fearful for their lives and sought safety in numbers. Though the law turned a blind eye to the crimes committed against Chinese immigrants, the government did not yet pass laws discriminating against these immigrants. When outrage against the Chinese immigrants began to creep its way into the United States government, though, Congress passed the Chinese Exclusion Act of 1882. This law prohibited immigration from China to the United States. There were a few exceptions, though. Merchants and diplomats were allowed to stay on American soil for business. There were some Chinese Americans who did become wealthy and left home for China. Though this was the intent of most immigrants coming to America, this happened to very few of them. There were many reasons for anti-Chinese sentiment, but by far the most influential was the fear of opium addiction. The British Empire exported opium to China in order to balance trade, and many Chinese citizens became addicted to this new substance. Though many Western nations paid this no mind in the beginning, Chinese immigration to the United States changed that. When immigrants from China began to make up a significant portion of the Californian population, doctors began to see opium affect American soil for the first time. Doctors were frightened of the effects opium smoking had on individuals. It was reported to cause many undesirable traits, most of them associated with weakness or laziness or femininity. The American ideal was to be dominated by strong, masculine men who worked hard to make the nation a better place to live in. The whole idea of America that these doctors had was seemingly challenged by the very existence of opium. Doctors and scientists had failed at preventing the spread of opium addiction and sought to find a cure for opium instead. Many scientists attempted to create cures from opium itself, but the most famous was known as morphine. Morphine was synthesized from opium and induced a more powerful high, and users had a higher chance of becoming an addict when doing morphine rather than doing opium. In an attempt to cure morphine addiction, another scientist created a chemical called heroin. Heroin, however, met the same fate as morphine and became an even more powerful drug than both morphine and opium. Though both of these chemicals failed at curing opium addiction, they found use in the medical field. As medicine became more advanced, surgeries that altered the human body to support patients with serious illness became more widespread. Though they were useful in treating patients, they caused amounts of pain that sent many patients into shock, and patients that moved could endanger the surgeries. The amplified effects of opium present in these drugs became useful for sedating patients before surgery. Though there were setbacks faced during the time when Chinese immigrants came from China, there were also times when the immigration benefited people on both sides of the issue. Today, the United States is facing a very similar issue with Mexican immigration. Many political leaders called for a policy of no toleration towards immigration, similar to the one many Americans took during the Chinese immigration crisis. These policies have not achieved what they were designed for. They only caused strife on both sides of the issue. It is important now to see the mistakes we made in the past and learn from them by welcoming immigrants into a nation made up of immigrants' descendants.